Hello, this is Justin Williams with the Wolfpacker Podcast. I'm joined tonight by co-host Matt Carter, who's just getting home from PNC Arena after NC State's second ACC victory of the 2020-21 season, a 79-76 victory over Boston College at home to end the 2020 year. And NC State will next play in early January at Clemson next week. But before we get too far into this episode, this podcast is brought to you in part by JFQ Lending. With interest rates below 3%, there has never been a better time to lock in a low fixed interest rate on your mortgage. You'll never need to think about refinancing again. Set it and forget it. And with JFQ Lending, you are guaranteed to get the highest level of customer service. They have an A-plus rating with the Better Business Bureau and over 3,000 five-star reviews. Give Hunter Clausen a call today at 480-513-3992 or email Hunter directly at hclausen@jfqlending.com. That's HCLAUSSEN@jfqlending.com. JFQ Lending, Inc., Equal Access Lender, licensed in over 40 states, www.jfqlending.com. And while you're at it, head over to thewolfpacker.com and use promo code PACK60. That's promo code PACK60 for a free 60-day trial on all of our premium content, news, and analysis over at thewolfpacker.com. We got the bowl game coming up this weekend. Obviously, we're already in conference play and in basketball season, so plenty of great premium content that you definitely want to take advantage of. So use that promo code PACK60 for a free 60-day trial on all of our good stuff there at thewolfpacker.com. Okay, Matt, let's talk about NC State's second victory in the ACC slate this year. NC State advances to 6-1, 2-0 in ACC play with yet another 79-76 victory over Boston College. You know, thinking back to the game predictions we made earlier this morning, I'm kicking myself for not just going with another 79-76 outcome. I mean, maybe I'm going to have to predict the next game to turn out a 79-76 because it sure seems that NC State has a knack for, at least early on in ACC play, jumping out to an early first half lead, letting it slip a little bit before halftime, letting the other team come back and making it a close game down to the final minute of the game, and then ultimately winning with the exact same score they beat Carolina last Tuesday, 79-76. NC State escapes with a 3-point victory. And I think there's a lot to take away from this game. There's definitely some positives. There's also some negatives. I don't think this win has nearly the glam that beating your arch rival at home for the first time in 7 years has. But with that said, you know, we finally got to see a full strength NC State roster for about 10 minutes tonight. So that was good to see. And then, of course, inevitably, NC State loses, you know, whether it's going to be temporary or not. But Manny Bates there in the first half with an apparent left leg injury. He's going to get an MRI after the game, and we'll await his status moving forward towards the next game against Clemson. But he was out for the rest of the way. But you get fifth-year senior forward DJ Funderburk back, and he made his presence known early. So I think we definitely want to touch on that. But, Matt, just kind of your main takeaways from tonight, kind of a similar fashion now that I'm thinking back on it. It pretty much played out pretty similarly to the way the Carolina game went. I think NC State probably played better against North Carolina, considering that was just a better opponent. Boston College is not a good ACC team, but they're scrappy, and they've got some players that certainly can make shots down the stretch, as they showed tonight. But what do you make of NC State coming out hot, looking good in the first half, jumping out to a big lead, letting the Eagles come back and make it a game, but then ultimately hanging on for the victory to advance to 2-0 in conference play?
Yeah, I thought the first half was very similar to UNC, and I gotta first say I'm a little disappointed. Tim Peeler hasn't yet found out is this is the first time in school history that NC State has beaten an opponent by an identical score of 79-76 in back-to-back games. I'm willing to bet that has never happened in the 100-plus years of NC State basketball. And so I threw it out to Tim Peeler to see if he could come up with the nugget. So far, he's letting me down. He's given me some excuse about already being tucked in for bed or some nonsense like that. I mean,
I know, bed by midnight. I mean,
we gotta. I mean, I'm getting my practice here for New Year's Eve to be up by this late for the New Year's. But I thought the first half they were almost identical in both games. NC State kind of had a double-digit lead for most of the half, as you mentioned. It's something that's actually in the quick hits column that I have on site online. UNC, I think, scored the last maybe 9 points of the first half to cut it down to 7. BC scored the last 5 to make it a 10-point game. The biggest difference between the two games is BC actually completed the comeback. North Carolina never tied or took the lead. And BC actually completed the comeback. That was the big difference to me in this game. And NC State had to make shots. So the biggest positive I took is that with the game on the line on multiple occasions, the combination of Jericho Hellam first, going 8 straight points, including twice giving NC State the lead back after it had lost the lead. And then freshman guard Shaquille Moore with the dagger back-to-back baskets in the last 30 seconds of the game to give NC State the lead, and then the final points. So that's the biggest positive to me. And again, you look at NC State, they win games even though there's plenty more to be had. Now, Thunderbuck was awesome. I'm sure we're going to talk about him in his first game back. But as you mentioned, Manny Bates went down after playing about 7 minutes with a knee injury. We should note Kevin Keats didn't sound concerned. I think he even said he was not overly concerned. I think he was being a little bit generous when he said it was a coach's decision to hold him out in the second half. Anybody that watched him come out, and I've mentioned this on the board, this was a great reason why you could be a premium subscriber, is I know that he went through that layup line and did not look one time. He showed up a little bit after the other guys had taken the floor. He had the wrap on his knee. He went through the layup line one time, barely got off the floor, and just kind of threw it up at the backboard and just kind of went right to the tunnel. He clearly knew he just didn't have it. So we'll have to see how that goes. And then, quite frankly, I thought the point guard position duo, Braxton Beverly and Cam Hayes, were a no-show collectively between the two of them, to be honest. So, they got nothing out of the point guard position. And we now know, whether the freshman big Ebenezer Dewana is still kind of working his way back in, but that remained to be seen. He was on the bench. He was available. He did not play. But clearly, Jalen Gibson had a very tough 1 minute of action before he was quickly pulled. And so, I mean, they were down to basically one big man that Kevin Keats had confidence in at this moment. And they got nothing from the point guards. And BC probably shot as well as they could hope from 3-point range in this game. And NC State found a way to win. So, if you want to be the glass half empty guy, which, hey, we're getting ready to end this most awful year of years, and we're about to head to 2021. So we should be glass half full. That's a positive right there that they pulled that win out.
Well, to your point, I think you can really take the negatives from this game and turn it into a positive that NC State is able to win a game like this. Don't know how many other games in the ACC that they would be able to pull out, when you have a night where pretty much everything that could go wrong is, I mean, granted, you get solid nights from, two of your reliable bigs. I guess that's what we're calling Jericho Helms now, that he had to play stretch 5 there for a good chunk of the second half. But Jericho Helms and DJ Funderburk both with 20 and 21 points tonight, respectively. But you look at, what NC State has done well through 6 games before Wednesday night against Boston College. They're forcing turnovers at a high clip. They're winning the turnover margin. They're one of the best teams in the country at turnover margin. I think Wednesday night was the first time this season that NC State actually committed more turnovers than its opponent. Correct me if I'm wrong there, Matt, but NC State commits 17 turnovers. Boston College ends the night with 16. And it looked like the Wolfpack was off to a strong start there, forcing turnovers. I think Boston College had, at least 10 or a dozen there in the first half, but they really took care of the ball there in the second half. NC State wasn't able to force as many steals and turnovers like they have been all season. And then that kind of starts taking away some of NC State's potency on the offensive end. They like to keep the game in transition. They don't want to be, stuck in half court for large chunks of the game. That's when the offense can start to get a little bit lethargic. Then you look at the 3-point shooting. NC State's been a really strong 3-point shooting team this year. I think entering this contest, they were shooting about 39%. Tonight, just 25%. And you look at, I think Devin Daniels and Thomas Allen combined shoot 3 of 10 from the 3-point land. That's half of your 3-point attempts right there. Thomas Allen, I thought was pretty good tonight. Again, we're still kind of waiting for him to become more and more aggressive. More of these shots knock in. He makes 2 of 5, 40%. That's good. Nothing to knock there, but Braxton Beverly 0 of 4 from the 3-point line. Devin Daniels 1 of 5 from the 3-point line. So the shots weren't really going for the Wolfpack, but still, with all of that said, you can almost spin that into a positive and say, okay, well, now this team is, building some resiliency, showing some grit, showing that they can find a way to win tough games, as Coach Keats told his players and then told the media that he told his players after the game, in order to win championships, whether it be a conference championship or a national championship, you're going to have to figure out ways to win games in different fashions. And it's not always going to be a, jump out to a 20-point lead and then comfortably close out the game with a double-digit, deficit down the stretch. NC State could have probably put this game away earlier in the first half. I think they stretched the lead out to about 15 points there with a few minutes to go. But, 2-0 is 2-0. I think this is from what I read on Tim Peeler's response to you on Twitter tonight, I think this is just the 6th time since the 1974 national championship that NC State has opened ACC play with a 2-0 record. So,
at home.
At home. Okay.
Yeah, the first time, it was the 5th time that they've had back-to-back home games to start the ACC, and they won both of them.
Okay. That makes it a little less special. I was about to say, if that's only the 6th time in that long of a stretch, that would be pretty depressing. But, yeah. But with that said, it doesn't happen every year. It's a good way to start the season. You take the wins where you can get them. But let's talk about some of the individual performances tonight. I know we were alluding to DJ Funderburk. And before I forget, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, all that good stuff. So give us a subscribe and tell us what you like about the podcast. But DJ Funderburk returns after nearly a month out. I think he was in quarantine. He said in the post game for about 15 days when he, quote, got the COVID, whatever that means, make of it as you will. But he finishes with 21 points, a season high for him, 17 of them in the first half. He was, I think, 8 of 9, 9 of 10 from the field. His lone miss in that first half was a 3-pointer that Kevin Keats said after the games that he gave him a Kevin Keats death stare after he took that shot. He wants Funderburk to be playing inside out. And that's really what he was doing for a majority of that first half. And it seemed like almost every time he'd get a bucket, it was either a good feed to him in the post, he'd draw a foul or, make a good post move, or he was getting a nice little putback, off of a Devin Daniels floater or a Cam Hayes missed layup or whatever. But that's exactly what you want from Funderburk. Maybe loses a little bit of steam there in the second half. Again, he was out for a better part of 3 weeks, first game since December 3rd. So, understandable that maybe he lost his legs there a little bit in the second half, got into some foul trouble, wasn't on the court as much. But, what do you make of DJ Funderburk's return to the lineup? And from what you saw in that first 7 minutes, how good does having both DJ Funderburk and Manny Bates on the floor at the same time make this NC State team?
I mean, we've seen it a lot, obviously. I think with maybe the lack of development we've seen from Jalen Gibson and Ebby Dewana at this point, I don't know how much we're going to see it until Kevin Keats feels more comfortable with those two guys. But Keats have to be pleased with the way Funderburk was finishing. He was finishing with moves. He made his shots at the basket, which is what you're looking for. This was a team that you probably could do that against. I don't know if Boston College really has an interior defensive presence. I love Stephon Mitchell. I mean, he's the type of guy I like having on the floor, because although in this particular game he hurt BC trying to shoot that corner three a little bit too much, but he rebounds and he plays defense, but he's not a shot blocker. And BC doesn't have any of those type of guys. So this is a game where you can attack the rim. I think NC State, they had plus 20 points in the paint. That was the difference in the game, because they were minus 15 on threes. As you mentioned, they did have the advantage in points off turnovers, even though they lost the turnover margin, but BC won the rebounding margin again. That's just going to be a theme this year for NC State, and they had the advantage in second chance points. But NC State was able to dominate points in the paint, particularly early. When they jumped out to the double-digit lead, it was all in the paint for NC State. And that was all Funderburk. I mean, to be blunt, that was just strictly Funderburk getting himself in the right position, and teammates doing a good job getting it to him. Sometimes he got it off the offensive rebound. But no question. And I want to go back a little bit to Thomas Allen, just kind of a couple of his, you mentioned he hit a couple of threes, but he also, for guard, he had 6 rebounds, 2 steals, and 3 assists, and only 1 turnover. And him and Shaquille Moore kind of had to carry the backcourt in this game. And obviously Shaquille Moore made the shots late. Shaquille Moore had 4 steals in this game. He's up to 16 steals in 7 games. I looked it up. That's not the first time he's had 4 steals in a game this year. His defense was really a difference maker. And that was key, because as you look at the two, Cam Hayes and Braxton Beverly, they both went scoreless from the field. They had a combined 3 assists and 4 turnovers in the game. So, in addition to Funderburk's play in the paint, I think the Allen Moore duo in the backcourt and the timely play of Helms there in the second half, that's what stood out to me individually. I thought Helms in particular, I know you wrote, I'm pretty sure you wrote at least about Helms is bouncing back. I mean, he had a miserable offensive game against UNC, which I think Kevin Keats is right to say didn't tell the whole story of Helms' performance in that game, because he did a good job defensively, despite being undersized in a defensive matchup. But the offense was back, and he was the lone guy that was reliable at the free throw line, it seemed like. There's a second straight game where there was a little bit of shakiness at the free throw line for NC State.
Well, I want to get to Moore for sure, because we need to talk about him. But that's a good segue into Helms, who clearly did have an offensive bounce back. Really just was not his shooting night against Carolina, but I was defending him on the message boards. I know it's easy to pick on a guy that, can't make a shot, and seemingly was shooting a lot there in the second half in that Carolina game until, basically just kind of shut it down. But he shut down the preseason ACC Player of the Year, Garrison Brooks, on defense all night in a game that NC State was really outmatched in terms of its size without a DJ Funderburk in the lineup. And those are the things that, they're not accounted for on the stat sheet, and they're not going to get, the headlines written about you, but those are the things that can win games. And so you got to go easy on Jericho Helms in that last game because he really came up big on the defensive end. And I think he was still impressive tonight on the defensive end. This time the shots were just dropping. That's pretty much what Keats was alluding to in the post game. He has 20 points, efficient from the field, 5 of 8 from the field, made his only 3-point attempt and made 9 of his 11 free throw attempts. NC State was a better free throw shooting team tonight, made 18 of 26 from the stripe. And that's a 69.2% free throw percentage, which is not a glamorous free throw shooting percentage, but better than what had happened last Tuesday night when seemingly NC State couldn't get a free throw to drop there late in the second half when they were trying to close out that game. But yeah, Helms, I think that's a great word for it, timely. He just came up big in the second half. 12 of his 20 points came in the second half. 7 of those 9 free throws in the second half. Was good on the boards, stepped up on defense when Bates came out of the game. And, I think after this one, at this point in time in the season, I think we've identified, and Keats has identified himself, that he's got 3 trustworthy interior players that he can play. Manny Bates and DJ Funderburk are the obvious guys, but Jericho Helms is a guy where, is he playing from the perimeter? Is he playing from inside? Keats is going to have to use him more on the inside as guys like Ebenezer Dewana and Jalen Gibson develop. You said Jalen Gibson played 1 minute. That was a generous 1 minute. It seemed like he played maybe one possession, and it was a quick turnover on offense, and they quickly pulled him.
Yeah, he had a turnover on offense and what should have really been a layup.
Right.
And then he let a defensive rebound slip out of his hand and go out of bounds on the next possession. And then I very quickly heard, DJ, because you can hear everything in the arena. And that was it for Jalen Gibson.
Well, it's important to note, going into this year, Jalen Gibson was that last scholarship filled in the 2020 class when Josh Hall decided to go to the NBA early. Who was going to be the headline 5-star pickup of this 2020 class. Jalen Gibson came in as a guy that wasn't expected to be a contributor immediately. He was more of a developmental guy. So the fact that he's been playing minutes, whether, even as limited as they've been here in these last few games early on in his freshman season, shows that he has at least developed quicker than Keats maybe thought coming in. And we'll see what the future holds for him. I still think he's a high ceiling guy, but I don't know how much NC State's going to be able to rely on him in the post against these ACC bigs here in 2020, 2021. But let's talk about the freshman of the night, the freshman of the past weeks, literally the ACC freshman of the week last week for his breakout game against Carolina. Has another great game tonight in Shaquille Moore. And he's the hero tonight. He made the game-winning shot there with about 26 seconds to go, hits a pull-up jumper where I think Keats alluded to after the game, he actually wanted him to pass the ball. He didn't want that freshman taking that shot, but, forgivable because he was a freshman. He didn't know better, and he just had the guts to take it, goes down, and it didn't make it a nerve-wracking possession for NC State. They just knocked down that quick shot. Instantly, the pressure was on Boston College, and you had to think, there down the stretch with 4 minutes to play, the field goals really weren't dropping for either team. Both teams really stepped it up defensively and maybe took a step back offensively. But, you had to have some confidence that NC State was going to be able to pull out one more stop on the defensive end. And then with 10 seconds to go when NC State, Devin Daniels dove for that loose ball on a lazy pass by Boston College there. I was a bit surprised Boston College didn't foul earlier than they did. They went into full court press with about 11 seconds to go, and NC State was able to execute a few passes and eventually found Shaquille Moore, who was able to he attempted a slam dunk with 1 second left to make it a 3-point game. It wasn't a flush dunk, but it was maybe partially blocked. There was a little bit of contact there. Ball hit the rim a little bit and then rattled in to secure the victory for NC State. But a game like this, Keats talked about after the Carolina game that, despite the fact that Shaquille Moore was on fire early on in that game, clearly was one of the best options offensively against the Tar Heels. He still didn't trust his freshman guards to go in there in crunch time and pull out a win against, in a big rivalry game like that. And now Wednesday night, you have Braxton Beverly who fouls out of the game with 4 minutes to go. Your senior guard who, Keats probably trusts as good as anybody on this roster. He didn't really have a choice but to stick with Moore down the stretch, and it ended up paying off for him. And you have to think moving forward, games like this, performances like this, and shots like that Moore made, that has to build the trust with Keats and specifically Moore. I think Hayes will eventually earn that trust as well. But, as the season progresses, will we see the freshman earn some more time there late in the second half with the game on the line? Moore finishes the night with a season high 26 minutes tonight, 12 points as well, as the tied for the third leading scorer on the pack with Devin Daniels. But just your thoughts on Shaquille Moore's performance tonight. Obviously, he was phenomenal on defense. He's quickly becoming a guy kind of like Manny Bates. Like, he's going to be a great defender. You just don't know what you're going to get on the offensive end. But just, what do you make of Moore and his arrival as a key contributor here in these last two games?
Yeah, and I'll get to more. One interesting thing that may have gotten lost, because you reminded me on the last play, Devin Daniels makes a good defensive play.
Mm-hmm.
They get the jump ball with 14.4 seconds left. Yeah, what was funny was, I don't know if they caught this on TV, but the Boston College coaches were upset early in the second half. NC State got the first possession of the second half, which means the possession they were obviously supposed to switch. I don't know what happened, but on the first jump ball of the second half, the possession arrow was still pointing to NC State's way, and NC State got the ball back. So if you would have done that right, flip-flopping, that possession arrow at the end would have been going to Boston College instead of NC State. So that one little hiccup, whatever happened, played a very small role in how the game turned out on the end.
2020, the most un-Wolfpack year of all time. 8-3 in football and number 3 in women's basketball. And
I didn't know
Carolina at home in men's basketball.
I didn't know if they had caught that on television.
They didn't.
Yeah,
they didn't.
The BC coaches were, when that first jump ball happened in the second half, and they pointed NC State possession arrow, they were all, kind of going, wait a second. And they were trying to get the referee to say, it's our ball. And referee said, no, arrow pointing towards NC State. And it's just kind of, but anyway, back to Shaquille Moore. Obviously Kevin Keats had no choice in this particular game. And he mentioned after the game, Cam Hayes is still working his way back into shape. After at a minimum, he had a quarantine. So you knew he would obviously had to quarantine for 14 days. If he got caught up in contact tracing, or if he was one of the positive tests, he's having to recover from having COVID, which would probably require some time to get your endurance back. And Braxton Beverly didn't have it tonight. I mean, this was just, I'm a Braxton Beverly defender a lot of times. Just wasn't a good game for Braxton tonight. Fouled out. He would, he didn't seem to put it, he's always going to have issues defensively, but this game he seemed to have even more issues defensively. And just didn't have it. So, I mean, you had to go with Shaquille Moore and Thomas Allen. And those two guys I felt like stepped up. And, yeah, I was a bit surprised. Shaquille Moore went ahead and took that shot. But we saw him at a crucial point in the St. Louis game decide that he was going to do a three-pointer that was almost like a heat check three. And it was not a good shot. Unfortunately, in that particular case, he missed it. And it set up a big three on the other end for St. Louis. But he's unafraid. He's obviously unafraid. He believes he belongs. I think he had an interesting comment after the UNC game about blue bloods. I don't remember the exact comment about it, but
yep.
He believes he belongs. He thinks he I think there's a little bit of a chip on the shoulder mentality when he's on the court. And you can see it on the defensive end too. I mean, he's so confident that he can guard you defensively. He's almost like playing game to see if he can get the steal with you, and so he got some things to work on. He had 4 turnovers in this game. That's too many, as you might hear the clock in the background of my house right now.
The most wonderful time of the year, Matt.
Yeah. My wife's favorite Christmas decoration in the house, but he got to cut down on the turnovers, become a little bit more consistent shooter. Free throw line has been a little bit of an issue for him. Made 1 or 2 tonight. Got to get a bit better at that. But I thought he was really good. He's had a 3-game stretch at PNC Arena where I felt like each game they were his 3 best games of the year. So let's see how he does it when they hit the road at Clemson as well. So, but I'm ready. Go ahead.
I was going to say I wrote about him in my notebook, which will be on the Wolfpacker.com tomorrow morning. Check it out. Use promo code PACK60 for a free 60-day trial on the Wolfpacker.com. But in these last 3 games, he's hit 6 of 8 threes from beyond the arc, and he's also averaged 25.1 points per 40 minutes of play on offense. As we were talking about, we knew Moore was going to be a good defender. I mean, you talk to anybody that follows the high school basketball recruiting scene, closely as a scout. We talked to multiple scouts. They said this guy's one of the best defenders they've seen on the high school level in terms of on ball. And they knew he was going to be an elite defender, pretty much immediately coming into ACC play. But on offense, he still had questions. And, Keats talked about the work that coaching staff has put in with him to develop his shot. Well, he keeps shooting like this. He's really going to prove himself to be a reliable perimeter shooter for this Wolfpack team. He keeps shooting 6 of 8 from 3, and that'll even out. But he's really on a tear here on these last 3 games. He's got to be building plenty of confidence on the offensive end. So Matt, any other players you want to touch on specifically before we give out our game balls?
I'm ready. Give them out.
Okay, well, I'll let you start again.
Yeah, I'm going to give it to Jericho Helms. He was actually my player of the game and quick hits. That stretch where that was a dangerous moment in the game. And he and Winston Tabbs seemed to go back and forth, making big baskets. And if Helms didn't make those big baskets, Winston Tabbs could have potentially put NC State in a really bad position with a few minutes left in the game. And the way the game was going, I'm not sure who else on the floor at that point in time could have done that. He also had 6 defensive rebounds, which was important because NC State, that's the biggest area of improvement for NC State is defensive rebounding and preventing second chance points. So he had the biggest plus minus on the team at +10. I will say, as I noted in quick hits, there are some funny numbers in those plus minuses. So take them with a grain of salt, because I'm 99.9% sure that Manny Bates was not a -6 while he was on the floor, because NC State never trailed it. Yeah, NC State didn't trail into the second half. So that's not statistically possible. So there's some kind of glitch happened on the plus minus, but if they're accurate with the rest of the guys, then Helms had the best plus minus on the floor. So, but I just give him my game ball.
Well, certainly a deserving guy tonight. I think I've got a couple of deserving guys left at my disposal. It's tough to not give DJ Funderburk a game ball with a 21-point performance coming back for the first time in over a month. Really efficient from the field, 8 of 10. But I'm not going to give it to him. He's going to get more opportunities this year. He's a 5th-year senior, so you almost kind of come to expect him to step up in these type of games. I'm going to give it to Shaquille Moore. You gave Shaquille Moore the game ball against Carolina. I wanted to give him the game ball against Carolina, so I'm going to give it to him tonight. Hits the game-winning shot. You got to give it to him. I mean, if he doesn't hit that shot, NC State might be looking at 1-1 in conference play right now. So Good for him. He comes up with 26 big minutes, steps up when, it just wasn't Beverly's night, wasn't really Hayes' night either. And as you mentioned, he and Thomas Allen really had to pick up some of the slack in the backcourt. He finishes the night with 12 points, his second highest total in his first 7 games as a member of the Wolfpack. 5 of 8 from the field, 1 of 2 on 3-pointers, 1 of 2 on free throws. Did have 4 turnovers, but he also had 4 steals, grabbed a couple rebounds, and had an assist as well. So an impressive performance from him. And it'll be interesting to see how he continues to develop because, to me, he looks like the best athlete on this team. It's tough when you got Manny Bates, right, as well. But in terms of the backcourt, he's an athletic freak, and he's got all the intangibles. So we'll see what he can do with the skills and keep knocking down those shots, see what he can do on the offensive end. But NC State sitting at 2-0 in conference play. A big game coming up against Clemson next week, a game that, Clemson will probably be ranked as long as they don't lose before the Wolfpack come to, well, I guess it's not Lil John anymore, but down in Clemson, South Carolina. So NC State's first road conference game coming up. We'll have you covered on all of the pregame stuff there. But thank you for listening to the listeners at home. Before you tune out, please be sure to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast wherever you listen to us. We're on Google Play, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to us. You can always stream us on the Wolfpacker.com. And while you're on the Wolfpacker.com, please use promo code PACK60 for a free 60-day trial on all of our premium content, news, and analysis. You can follow us on social media. You can follow us at the Wolfpacker on Twitter. That's our main account. You can follow me personally at Justin H. Will. Like us on Facebook, NC State Wolfpack on the Wolfpacker.com. And for Matt Carter, this is Justin Williams, and we wish you a happy new year, even though we're going to have another podcast before the new year. So we'll wish it to you again then, but have a good night and enjoy Wolfpack football or basketball in 2020.